Then, as time goes on, I would say the quality of art sort of plateaus. It kind of stays the same between the Renaissance and even through the 19th century, because at some point there is a peak of how good art can actually be when made by human hands. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, well, post Reformation, and in the 18th and 19th centuries, people start experimenting with different kinds of styles. And this is good for the most part. Like early Monet, like the first majority of Monet's life, uh, for the most part, it's good. But then at times, it starts getting a little bit weird once you get to the end of the 19th century. Because when you get to the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, you start getting Van Gogh, who was actually a very talented and excellent painter. The problem was that he got hooked on drugs. And he started painting while using a narcotic of some kind. There is one painting in particular that's of the village church where he grew up. It looks like a 7-year-old drew it.
Hmm.
Like I'm almost positive I have walked down the hallway of a school and seen an almost identical picture put up on a bulletin board held up with a tack by some proud teacher of what a student has done. And that's supposed to be just great art. Monet is supposed to be, or not Monet, Van Gogh is supposed to be one of the greatest artists of all time. Well, nobody bought his art when he was alive. Nobody cared at all about his art when he was alive. Then he cuts off his ear to try to impress a girl, because apparently that's what you do. And he goes further and more depressed, uses more and more drugs, and ultimately kills himself.
Dang.
Then his art is popular.
Hmm.
And here is sort of the crux of the matter when it comes to how a shift in the understanding or the idea behind art happens, is that somebody got a hold of Van Gogh's work and heard his life story and then saw him progress from beginning to end and then went, oh, this poor, poor troubled man. Oh, this tormented soul. Here, and then goes about and starts selling it and buy the art from this poor tormented soul. Buy the art that you can see the spiritual torment in. And I think that's where the shift starts to take place. Because at that point, his stuff is selling like hotcakes. Like all the rich people in the world suddenly becomes very in vogue to have a Van Gogh. And then for basically the entirety of the 20th century, having an original Van Gogh is considered the height. And here's why I say this is important. It no longer became about the subject. The art no longer became about what the piece was about. The art then becomes about the artist. And you can kind of see this happen because we see a lot of artists in the 20th century who had talent, definitely had talent, but and they paint really detailed stuff, but it's just bad. And the reason for that is because it becomes pretentious, and it becomes pretentious because the art world starts producing artists that are full of themselves without reason. Now, I'm not going to pretend like artists in the 20th century were pinnacles of virtue or weren't full of themselves, because they absolutely were. But there was clearly a reason for it. Michelangelo knew exactly what his work was worth. And basically everybody in Rome knows you don't tell Michelangelo how to paint something. In the altarpiece of the Sistine Chapel, in the bottom right corner, there is a man, because the very bottom of the painting is supposed to be a representation of hell. And in the very bottom right corner, there is a man completely naked, with donkey ears, having his genitals bitten off by a snake. The reason that's there is because while Michelangelo was painting it, in his mind, when he is representing heaven, he is thinking of a glorified body. A glorified body does not need clothes because a glorified body feels no shame. We wear clothes to cover our shame. It's a result of the fall. A glorified body does not feel the result of the fall, therefore, a glorified body does not need clothes. It's a sound theological reason for painting a naked Jesus. This cardinal walks in and then flies off the handle and starts screaming at him for painting people naked. And he had also cause to be cautious as well,
Mm-hmm.
because the Protestants were using Catholic art against us because of this idea that, well, nobody in heaven wears clothes because everybody in heaven is experiencing a glorified body. So there's not any need for clothes. Because of this, people paint their subjects naked. So the Protestants get a hold of some of these and then go, look how terrible the Catholics are that they put pornography up in their churches.
And there's something to be said for what you're doing, the purpose of your art, but also the audience that your art will have.
This is true.
Sometimes it may not be prudent to do such a thing.
That's true, which is why the cardinal was not completely in the wrong. But you also don't tell Michelangelo how to do his job. You just don't do that. So that guy in hell having his junk bitten off with donkey ears is that cardinal.
Or Pinocchio. Sounds like the adult version of Pleasure Island.
So that's basically what happened. And I think there is a subtle, another subtle dig. Maybe Michelangelo knew something about the personal life of that particular cardinal that was like, really? You are gonna tell me about this?
Well, we don't know that, but
We don't know that. It's a theory. But it also was the Renaissance, and that was a particular problem of that time. So, contrasting that with, I don't know, pick any big artist of the 20th century, Picasso or Salvador Dali.
okay.
Which Salvador Dali may have been a little bit earlier, but contrast that with like Picasso. People buy Picasso because it's Picasso. Nobody buys a Picasso because you like the way he, in particular, represented that one thing. On my wall in my dining room, we have a print of the Disputatio by Raphael. It is probably one of the best theological and artistic depictions of the Blessed Sacrament ever made. And that's kind of an undisputed fact. So I wanted it. So I asked for it for my birthday. I got it, and I put it up on my wall. I don't care that it was Raphael. I care that it is the Disputatio.
When you were saying that, like, yeah, what was going through my head was, if you look at that, like, who thinks that it's a Raphael? An art student, maybe, but like, no one cares because they're drawn to, like, the image is the more memorable thing, which is
It's
how it
also
ought to
why
be.
hardly anybody ever signed their work in the Renaissance.
Hmm.
Now, you could tell by the style, kind of, if you really knew what you were looking for. But the average person who's looking at it, the public, the people who are coming into the churches and seeing these on a regular basis and using these as an aid to prayer, they don't know the difference from one style to another. They don't know, oh, well, that looks like a Michelangelo because he has the light working in this way, or oh, that's a Caravaggio because of how the light works, or whatever. They don't know that. All they know is it's a beautiful painting. A poor man walks into a church, he sees a beautiful painting, and he goes, wow, that is a beautiful painting of the Blessed Mother. And he may then add the thought, thank God for the artist who did that, and God bless the artist who did that. The Lord makes some people incredibly talented for a reason.
I
Now
think your
everybody has
point,
to sign their work.
it's a brilliant point.
And here's another thing that I will point out. Michelangelo did sign one work. He put his name on exactly one thing, and that is his Pietà. But the Pietà was the first, it was his breakout sculpture. It was kind of the first big thing that he did. Kind of what put his name out there to everybody that's wanting to commission artwork for churches. So his famous Pietà, which is in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, gets unveiled. It gets put out. People love it. They come to see it. They pray by it. Well, one day, Michelangelo, who is in his 20s because he's recently finished his art school, is walking through St. Peter's Basilica, passing by the Pietà. And he sees these two men standing there, and they are talking about the Pietà, saying how wonderful it is and how great it is, but they think it was done by somebody else, and they unknowingly put somebody else's name to it. So Michelangelo, who is a 20-something Italian male, says, well, I'll set them straight. He goes home, he gets a hammer and a chisel, comes back under the cover of darkness, and carves his name in the Blessed Mother's sash, so that everyone will know who carved that. And it is still there. But in Michelangelo's memoirs, he said that he considered that one of his greatest sins. Because he put himself before the thing he was trying to represent. And it was something that he carried to his grave, which if he confessed it, he shouldn't have felt guilt over that. But, you know, you go to Mass in St. Peter's Basilica and look over there and see an artwork that you are convinced that you ruined because you put your name on it. It basically now is a constant reminder that
Yeah,
he
you
could
can't
have
exactly fill it in.
There is a way to fill it in, but I don't think it has been. Ever. Or I think it may have been filled in, and then somebody later heard that story and then went and then carved it back out again. Because it is also an important part of that sculpture, because that's part of the lesson of that sculpture, which is that art is about the subject.
Mm-hmm.
It is about what you are drawing man's attention to. It is not about the artist. But in the 20th century, everybody was suddenly convinced that art was all about the artist. And then having a Picasso, an original Picasso, becomes the status symbol. Who cares what it is? Nobody cares at all what it is, what the picture represents. All they care about is that it's a Picasso, that it's a genuine Picasso, so they can hang it over their fireplace and brag about it to all their friends.
I mean, when a bunch of people deny God in one form or another, whether you leave the church, whether you become atheist, whether you become deist, like, you're becoming less of yourself, and your gaze is no longer transfixed on your maker,
And when you
on the divine. And so you naturally turn inward. And it would make sense you start glorifying things in your art that ultimately are inward. And there's an ugliness to that.
And that's why I think nowadays people have a lot of artists at least have this idea that, oh, my art is about how I feel. I don't paint what I see. I paint what I feel. Well, apparently you don't feel very good because that looks like crap. That were your eyes open at the time you were using the brush.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why people are like, oh, this artist uses these techniques or whatever, or like because of whatever. Like you put paint in water guns and squirt the canvas with it. What? Why?
I mean, if you do, fine, but it's nothing but a tool. It doesn't.
Well, at
It
that
doesn't
point, you're
matter
just
so much as
playing.
what you do with it.
At that point, you're just playing. Now, maybe like if as a finishing touch on the page, if the squirting one squirt of paint at the canvas with a water gun gives you exactly the effect you're looking for, fine. But to say, oh, I'm trying this new technique and I am now, like, I am this artist. I am me. I am the master. I am Degas or whatever. I know Degas wasn't. Whatever. I am Gauguin. I am Picasso. It becomes all about you, which is what you were saying. Because when you stop worshiping the one true God, you will start worshiping something else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know atheists will say, I don't worship anything. Yeah, shut up. Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
You probably worship science. You probably worship nature. Probably worship the government. Or you worship yourself, which is the most common one.
Reason, your own intellect.
Then people stop truly worshiping God, even people that claim to be Christian, which is the majority of Christians nowadays, really only claim to be Christian. Even people who say they are Christian but do not actually properly worship God really worship themselves when you're not giving the proper respect to God first. If you give the proper respect, honor, and worship to God, then the proper respect and honor due to everything after that will follow in accordance.
And your fix will be oriented, and so your art will be oriented as well.
Exactly.
Just to drive this point home, there's a few examples I can think of just the either empty or horrendous nature, or both, of modern art. One is the rather obvious and notorious example of somebody who duct taped a banana to a wall and thought that was art. It's just so.
And then the
There's nothing
example
to
of
that.
the performer who then went and ate it, peeled the banana off the wall and then ate it.
Which is actually the most normal and redeeming thing about the whole thing, because
That's the one
there's
guy with
nothing to
sense in this
that.
whole affair.
Yeah.
He's like, it's a
There's
banana.
there's no one should put a value on that beyond the 39 cents it cost you to buy the banana. That's really all it's really all it should take.
Really,
Another
39
one would
cents from
be
the best one?
I remember going to like a sculpture garden near my place growing up. And I remember looking at the modern art, and it's what you would expect of the time. You know, it's pipes and this and that are oriented in different ways. And um, yeah, I looked at like the modern version of this place in preparation for this, and like there's some stuff there that they have that's good, and there's some stuff that just like, no, this makes absolutely no sense. It makes more sense if you realize like, oh yeah, it meant something to the artist making it, which just drives the point further home that we've been making. And the last example I'd bring up is there's this painting I was shown as part of a class in college of a crucifix. And it has on the surface like a beautiful red and yellow background, and it's like this cross is kind of coming out of it. And then you realize that the story of that painting is that the artist made it, he got that effect by putting a crucifix, I believe it was in a bucket of blood and cow piss, and shining a backlight through that bucket.
Mm.
And so it's called the Piss Christ. And once you understand that, you realize that there is absolutely no beauty to this thing whatsoever. That is horrible, disgusting, and blasphemous.
That is twisting. That is twisted and
Yeah,
evil.
you know. And I can't remember what I remember being told by my professor in this class where we looked at this thing. By Dr. Kilpatrick.
Ah,
I remember he relayed the artist's description of like why he did what he did and what his thought process was, and I can't remember what that is. But it doesn't matter what he said.
because it was all pretentious garbage.
Yeah. If you loved our Lord and wanted to make something that glorified him, something that was good, true, and beautiful, which are the tenets of, well, if it's not good, true, and beautiful, it's not art. He failed horribly on all three counts.
And if he argues with, if he would to argue with us on that, my response would be, would you like to paint a picture of your mother? Okay, now take your mother and dip her in cow blood and piss. Would you do that to your mother? No.
No, of
Would
course
you
not.
do that to your dad? No. Would you do that to your brother? No. You may feel like you want to sometimes to your brother, but you really wouldn't. Would you do it to your dearest friend? No. Would you do it to the king? No. Then why are you doing it to the king of the universe? To an image of the King of the Universe? Would you dip a picture of your mother in cow piss? No, it's just wrong. It's obscene. The fact that you had to listen to a full explanation by the artist of why he did that and what his thought process was, the fact that he is telling you his thought process and he is justifying it is kind of the clue that he knew it wasn't right.
And it's about him.
It's all about him. It's about what he wants. It's not about the subject. The most beautiful art in the world is about the subject.